Right. Yeah. Good evening, Richard Little from Your Land Partner. So a bit of a tech. I'm trying something different. How to record it first time. So Facebook, Zoom, and all those sort of things. So yeah, where we're at, we're on day 32 or session 32 out of 100, and we've reached the full development appraisal. Moving through. So I think we've already had an introduction from that from Bryn. So today I want to talk to you about demand and how we look at demand for a project. And often, as we all know, development projects are, some time in the making, many years in quite a few cases, actually, not a lot more than people would probably think. But, in the shortest, it's, you're 15, 18 months, and that's when you've got a ready to go project and you crack on with it. So it's always about demand because everything's about the exit. So when we're looking at various schemes, what we want to know is, what's the optimum scheme? What's the optimum mix potentially of unit sizes in any given project? And there is generally more than one way that you can do that. So when we're looking at a full development appraisal, we will generally take at least two, preferably three different schemes through. Now, it very much depends. If it's perhaps an apartment sort of development where maybe a little bit commercial or something on the ground floor or something like that, there tends to be less options, I suppose, in what you can actually get in there. So yeah, different sizes, etc. You can have studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, and obviously demand. We need to match demand with actually what we're going to get permission for. So demand, getting strong demand gives us a lot more of assurance, and any investors, any funders, it's going to give them the confidence, if you like, to move forward. So as I say, demand is all about the exit. So whilst we can say that demand doesn't change, and there is an opinion that it doesn't change that much. However, it only has to change a little bit to actually have a massive impact on any given project, depending on the scale and unit type, location, and all that sort of stuff. So what we tend to do, and it doesn't have to be what everybody does, our preference and our experience, if you like, is more in family homes. So tending to be 2s, 3s, and 4s bedrooms houses. More and more now bungalows, because there is a demand for bungalows. We all, I'm sure, aware of the terms baby boomers and that sort of thing. So we've got a lot of people my age and a bit younger than that as well, that are coming towards the latter part of their life, and we've probably got more cash in our pocket or in our bank accounts than a lot of you people watching this, I guess. So and we have the spending power, and what do we want? We might want to downsize. We just want to move location. But bungalows is the obvious one, because it's easier for us oldies to get about, mobility wise and all that sort of thing on one floor. So it's not all about bungalows, but we know ourselves in many areas that we're working, the premium on bungalows per square foot, per square meter that you are going to get on a sale anyway, is phenomenal. I'm actually doing one right at this moment where we're looking at 33-ish%, so between 30 and 35% over and above for every square foot, square meter that we're building as a bungalow, as against a house. Sorry. That's massive. So that's so demand is there. So I mean, mostly we're talking about residential, but more and more now we get involved in mixed schemes where there is an element of commercial to it. And that is possibly going to get a lot more common for many developers, particularly when we see changes of use from a lot of the perhaps possibly already and soon to be redundant sort of commercial enterprises, etc. Whatever sector they come from, but wherever we are in the cycle, the economic cycle, there is always opportunity for mixed developments. So we need to understand the demand all the way through. So right now for us in many areas, we many of the areas we're in anyway, they're not particularly suitable for apartments, and they're pretty much all well served with apartments. So, you know, that isn't our preference. So one of the things I would be very mindful when you're looking at demand is actually also you must look at the supply. You know, so we can talk to agents, which we would do locally wherever we are, to get a feel for where the demand is. We'll look for some local stats, etc., where we see the mixes. There's various websites. Just basically Google it. You'll come up with a number that are reasonable, you know, in terms of what they provide. They're just all bits of information that we actually then put together. So the safest is pretty much always twos and threes. You know, now whether you're renting them, whether you're selling them to the private market, or private sector, or whether you're selling them to housing associations or other registered providers, then twos and threes are the bread and butter. Yeah. So they're the things that we really do like. So the bulk of anything that we're doing will be in and around that. Now, it isn't about when we're actually looking at scheme designs, etc., which is a session for another day. But obviously, the demand feeds into the scheme design. It isn't about the biggest number of units. It isn't about the biggest number of square footage. It often is, but it isn't always. So, for instance, on a site, we can get 5 3-bedroom townhouses, so 3-story houses, and they're going to be worth about £350,000 each. Whereas on the same site, we're only going to get 8 apartments. Now, that's going to have a lower value. It's also going to have a lower build cost. So there, it's about what's the demand in that area. You know, the GDV in both of those cases is about £650,000 difference. But by the time we take out all the costs, etc., we're only talking perhaps about £150,000 in difference in margin that we're actually looking at. And obviously, we want the margin, we want the maximum margin, but it has to be deliverable. And this is where we're looking at demand. So we're always looking for oversupply. So as I say, you're looking at the supply. So what is there already in the area that you are looking at? Are there loads of, you know, I don't know, 2 and 3 bedroom houses already? Are there? In which case, you know, you might then say, oh, actually, there's a shortage of 4 bedrooms. We know an area that we've got sort of some collaboration going on, a business partner in that area. They're crying out for 4-bedroom houses. Now, that isn't that unusual in some areas, but also where we are right now is the 4 bedrooms aren't particularly selling right now because there probably is an oversupply of them. So many new builds around, which obviously putting a lot of new stuff into the market. You know, so that makes a lot of difference. And you shouldn't always just look at the new stuff. The new stuff, it's the supply of the whole market. So including the, you know, the existing stock, you know, what is there and how does what you might be looking at, how is that likely to compare? So it's having a good feel for what the demand is. But as I started off, it's not just what it is now, what might change. You know, so some of the things that change in many areas is perhaps some regeneration of certain areas, which might give you some competition, but it also might give you opportunity. So if there's large sort of regeneration investments going in, then that's generally quite good. Gentrification of areas as well generally starts bringing the values up. So, you know, the canny investor stroke developers are looking at sites, the next up and coming area, and they start acquiring and having discussions about sites in those areas before they're hot. When they're hot, you've generally missed the boat. You will be paying tip-top prices. So the guys that are coming in, and it's not all big developers, you can get in on small developments, but you need signs to say that area is actually up and coming. So it's not just the demand now, it's the demand what it might be. So if we get a pandemic, for instance, is that going to change what demand might be? So if we have a massive increase in home working, then that might make a difference in terms of smaller units, because they will become less attractive. So you'll still get rid of studios, you'll still get rid of ones, you'll certainly rent them, even if you can't always sell them, but actually they will become possibly less valuable. So it's those, perhaps, again, a 2-bedroom where you've perhaps got the second bedroom becomes an office, so it's pretty obvious, really. But what we certainly see is when people do start working from home, certainly in a situation like a pandemic, when there is lockdown, then actually they're working from where they can. We certainly have lots of calls and that when people are sitting on the edge of a bed, dining room table, because they haven't got the space. So is the demand going to change? So it may be that we have to do a little bit more clever space design with what we've got. But if the space isn't big enough in the first place, so the greatest design in the world isn't going to create too much more space. So are things changing? Will things change? So if you are, for instance, looking at a scheme of 21-bedroom apartments, in some areas that would be great. If you're in, certain parts of London or other big cities, probably fine. However, in Shrewsbury, where we are, I would say you might struggle. You might even struggle to rent them, never mind about sell them. Yes, you might be able to reduce the price, etc., etc. But so it's really stepping back when you're looking at projects and sort of saying what's coming up, and what is particularly in that area. So another thing that can change in an area is obviously, loss of employment, but also investment coming in where they're building, not a few years ago, we had Jaguar Land Rover factory that was built, well, it's 30 miles away, but it's only 20 minutes in the car. And that actually boosted quite a few prices on that route. So anywhere, not anywhere, but certain places within, 20 minutes, 30 minutes traveling distance, it was a limited amount of people work there, and that's all changing anyway. But it still has a boost to a relatively small area. It has a bit of a boost. So what's going on? What investment is there coming in? So it's not all about what's going out. It's all about what's coming. It can be about what's coming in as well. So the overall thing about the demand is, you do not know yourself, however well you know your area, you do not know enough on your own to say what the demand is now and what it's going to be. You do need to talk to agents. Now, I know, you get mixed quality of information from wherever you go, but this is where you come in. When we come in as lead developers, we have to make the judgment call. So we assess that information. We might talk to 3 or 4 people in the local area, say, what do we think? What we're saying, and then we'll have a look at demand. If there's loads and loads of units that have got planning consent or not on site yet, you start thinking, well, actually, maybe that's a bit risky if we put all of our efforts into a particular house type. So we're just working on a 40-unit site, and we've changed that even over the last 6 weeks on the mix. So once we take away the social housing, which is an agreed mix generally between who you're going to go with and the local authority, everybody wants a little bit of say. So we pretty much know what the demand is because we've got our end customer, we've got our exit there. So the other 27, 28 units, whatever it is, that are left on that site are either going to the market or we will keep some. So we're looking at the mix of those. So we've actually gone for quite a few bungalows, mostly 2-bedroom bungalows. We don't really do any 1-bedroom anything. I mean, we very rarely get 1-bedroom houses. There are a few around here, but you don't generally get too many. So it's 2-bedroom bungalows, 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom houses, and actually there's going to be I think 4 4-bedrooms, and 2 of those are capable of being 5s. So that's actually quite a good mix for us in 40 units. The 5-bedrooms, we might not even do them as 5 bedrooms. They might end up as 4. But if we think that the development is very open, very spacious, it's there's enough on there in many areas. There'd be 65, 75 units on there, but that's not what we tend to like to do. Now, that comes back down to often the arrangement that you've got with a landowner, you know, whether they're trying to squeeze every penny out of something or actually whether they want something that's deliverable. So we know in certain areas where we work that if we go less dense and offer up reasonable amount of affordable housing, then planning consent is relatively straightforward. I can't even say that with a straight face, but it's relatively straightforward. So again, you know, it's working out what the demand is and then taking that to your scheme design. So if you've got 40 units, we can take 3 quite easily different mixes of units through there to see how it shakes down financially. But like we said, we're not led always by the finance. It's actually what will actually sell or rent, both, you know, and what would they return? Because obviously we're always looking to de-risk, and the best way of de-risking is obviously got your exit sorted before you actually start a project. Now that whether that's 2 units or 20 units or however many that is. So the demand is quite easy to look at, but it's quite easy to go down the wrong route. Yeah. So what the planners might deem acceptable in many cases, certainly on some of the brownfield stuff that we look at, what they would quite like to see isn't where you're going to get your best demand. And if you are going for something that, again, it's easy to pick on apartments because there is in many areas way too many. You know, there just is, you know, but actually to try and get the best value, that's what people are still going for, and planners in some cases will let them go. But actually, what's the point of having a development where they're half empty and you can't even rent them out? That's a disaster. Yeah, and we know of quite a few of those, and maybe some of you people do, or maybe not, but they are around pretty much everywhere you go. You know, you don't always know that they're empty, possibly, but you know, that development hasn't always been a success. So demand is so important, you know, and obviously the demand is then closely worked with your exits, you know, and then that moves on to, you know, how you design and how you take it forward. But when we're doing the full development appraisal, just to repeat myself, as I often do, is we will take minimum 2, preferably 3 different schemes through that development appraisal, so we get a better idea of how the financials work. But we will not always go forward with the one that seemingly has the biggest margin, the biggest profit, if you like. It's all about delivering that, you know. So yeah. So been Richard Little from Your Land Partner, as ever, and that was demand for the full development appraisal. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.